Hello there. Here we are with the next chapter of our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. And I apologize for all this sweating. This garage is killing me over here. And anyway, before I get into Abraham Lincoln, I do have to mention there were a lot of giants at the time. Remember that slavery was looked upon by some people as a good, but believe it or not, look at my last video. But there were a lot of abolitionists that were probably you could say ethically, morally superior even to Abraham Lincoln. Now, William Seward, who was a man that was running for president, and Lincoln actually chose him to be the Secretary of Secretary of State. He was a strong abolitionist. Giants like Frederick Douglass. This is Frederick Douglass. Look him up. A giant of a man, former slave, looking for equality and abolishment of slavery. Ended up getting Abraham Lincoln's ear and influenced him greatly. Elizabeth Keckley, former slave for 30 years, became a maid in Abraham Lincoln's house. You could say she's one of the little people, just a maid. Big influence. Never underestimate the good that you can do talking to somebody. You could be a maid like this and influence a man like Abraham Lincoln. Believe it or not, these things happen. And over here, Thaddeus Stevens, strong abolitionist. If you see the movie Abraham Lincoln by Steven Spielberg, you would see him. He was played by Tommy Lee Jones. But anyway, Abraham Lincoln becomes president of the United States. He goes to Washington, D.C. Death threats start coming down. And Mary Todd Lincoln is scared for her husband's life. So what does she do? Well, basically, she goes with Lincoln. And Lincoln goes on a train to Washington, D.C. He wears a disguise. He has a bodyguard. And there was no Secret Service back then. He actually sneaks into Washington, D.C. because of the death threats. When he gets to a hotel to stay, he goes through the woman's door. He sneaks in. This is unheard of. But anyway, he gets there. As told, as soon as Abraham Lincoln becomes president, 7 states leave the Union. South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas left the Union. They decide to have their own country, and they had their own constitution and their own president. Jefferson Davis becomes president of the Confederacy, the South. The first few days, Abraham Lincoln starts hiring people, and you can see him over here in this picture over here with his cabinet, working with them. He spent days and days hiring people and trying to see what he could do to placate the South for what was coming. But anyway, he starts doing all of that. He hires William Seward, who was running for president, to be a Secretary of State. Salmon Chase, running for president, becomes Lincoln's Secretary of the Treasury. When the inauguration comes, Lincoln reassures the South, tries to anyway, and tells them it's unlawful to free slaves anyway, not to worry. The Constitution did not allow a president to free the slaves, which, by the way, is true. You couldn't just sign a paper and free the slaves. It didn't work that way. This is a constitutional law that says that slavery is legal, and Lincoln had no intention of turning that around. The South, however, took over federal forts. And among those forts was Fort Sumter in South Carolina, which became very, very symbolic. By the way, before I get to that, not all the slave states left the Union. Some of them stayed. And Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, North Carolina, Missouri, Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, they were slave states. They stayed with the Union for a while until Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter, a fort in South Carolina. The South said they wanted the fort. There were Union soldiers that were in there. Lincoln said that's federal property. It belongs to the United States of America. You cannot have it. You seceded from the Union. No, come back to us. And that fort belongs to the federal government. They said no. Now, Lincoln spoke to General Scott, war hero. General Scott said, let that fort go. His cabinet urged him, let it go. He spoke to Seward, who he respected highly. Seward said, let it go. Lincoln felt very depressed and very lonely. He was wondering what to do. He couldn't sleep. Some may say he even fainted at one point from the stress. But finally, he told the governor of South Carolina, I'm sending food to those men. I'm sending provisions. We're not going to do any shooting unless we're shot upon. And he told somebody his criteria was, if the South wants to fight so badly that they're willing to shoot at hungry men, so be it. Well, they sent the provisions. 36 hours of bombardment. This occurred in April of 1861, April 12th, the firing, the bombings began, and the Civil War began on that day. And because of the bombardment, the seven states that had slave states that had remained, they all left. They left, except for 4 of them. 4 states, and they were, I am sorry, I missed my notes over here. But anyway, of those states that I was talking about, Missouri, Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, stayed. Okay, now Abraham hoped that one big victory would end this war, so he was still hopeful. But at this point, with his binoculars, he could see rebel flags out in the distance. And from those rebel flags, he could see Washington, D.C. was very, very vulnerable. Mary Todd Lincoln was terrified. So they needed reinforcements. So reinforcements came. But, and Washington, D.C. became one of the most fortified cities in the world. But Lincoln decides to suspend what we call habeas corpus. Now, what is habeas corpus? It's basically when you get arrested, you know why you're getting arrested. Well, he suspended that, which means that you could get arrested and not even know what you're being charged with. This was very controversial. And Lincoln said, it's anti-constitutional, by the way, also. Lincoln said, well, if we suspend one part of the Constitution, perhaps we could save the whole thing. Now, he was worried that D.C. would fall. It was wartime. You could look at it any way you want. But the fact is that thousands of people were arrested without knowing what they were being arrested for because the government felt that they possibly were a threat to the Union. He was very, very criticized. He was called a tyrant. He was very depressed. Mary Todd Lincoln, what does she do when she becomes depressed? Well, Mary Todd Lincoln, when she becomes depressed, she goes shopping. And that's exactly what she did. She went shopping. But in the meantime, Lincoln asked for troops for 90 days. He thought the war was going to end very, very soon. And so he got the troops, and finally another big battle happened, the Battle of Bull Run, and the Union lost. The battle happened 25 miles away. Troops came back defeated. Over 600 dead, 2,000 wounded.